Let's talk now about business travel in the climate era. And we're going to ask some questions here with our amazing speaker who's about to come on. I'll introduce her. But we're going to ask, what are the key challenges facing business travel industry players when trying to balance travel needs and emissions reductions? We're going to ask, how can business travel be the tip of the spear and use its aggregated purchasing power to send the market signal for more sustainable travel? And the big question, is there a clear path to starting, advancing, and eventually leading action and progress to achieve that target, net zero by 2050? So to tell us all that in 10 minutes is Catherine Logan, Senior Vice President EMEA and APAC for GBTA in the UK. Catherine, all yours.
Good morning, and yes, I am delighted to be here with you to talk about business travel in the climate era. As we all know, the world has gone through many eras. The Jurassic era was a way long time ago, and more recently the industrial era, the digital era, and now we're in the climate era. And we know that business cannot thrive unless it adapts to this new reality and the challenges we face. Now, my name is Catherine Logan, and I lead GBTA's operations for EMEA and APAC, as Rajan said. And at GBTA, our focus is squarely on community, learning and advocacy, and bringing together the many voices for the one purpose of shaping the future of business travel, and that includes climate. Now, plenty of things have changed recently and are continuing to change within the global business travel industry. But what remains consistent is that sustainably managed business travel is a driving force for good, for businesses, for governments, for economies and people. And when it comes to business travel, what's facing the traveller and what's facing the travel manager? Business travel used to be very much about getting from A to B safely and affordably. In the climate era, we need to think about so many things on top of what went before. Climate is a challenge that needs to be faced and a risk that needs to be handled. And that risk comes in many forms. So there's the liability risk. Who takes responsibility for what? There's a transitional risk. There's so much changing around regulations, around technology, around market changes, how to keep on top of that. There's a reputational risk. We all know with the scrutiny of social media and the speed at which a company can be damaged by that, we really need to be careful and protect our reputations. And then there's a physical risk. Just think about the extreme weather events that we have been experiencing recently. They threaten life and limb for many people, but they also, and at the very least, they cause disruption to travel. Now, regulations are bringing more certainty, and that is a good thing, but they also bring an additional burden. There's regulations around disclosure, standards in reporting, monitoring of commercial practices, and so it used to be in the old days you would offset your emissions. That's no longer enough. It's no longer acceptable. And then there's now so much regulation around green claims and making sure that organisations don't make overinflated claims around their sustainability, feeding into, again, that reputational risk. And while Europe has led the way on much of what's happening globally, the whole regulation or the reporting standards is not just a Europe thing. In Singapore, US and Europe, new reporting requirements are being implemented from 2025. Say in Singapore and Australia, corporations are being required to submit mandatory reporting under ISSB and IFRS standards. In the US, it's the SEC climate-related disclosure, and while in Europe, of course, it's CSRD, and I have no doubt there was a lot of chat about that yesterday, and there'll be more today. So, I've outlined the challenge, but what can we do? We know the stakes are too high to ignore. And we think that the managed nature of business travel means that it is an opportunity to lead the way. Travel managers hold the keys to companies' emissions relating to business travel. We are a critical part of the solution. We are more organised. We have aggregated purchasing power. The total business travel spend in 2024, we think that's going to be $1.5 trillion, and that's one heck of a buying signal. We have the opportunity to invest in solutions that will take us to a more sustainable future. Business travel equals managed travel equals, when driven sustainably, a force for good. It's the tip of the spear to drive the change that is needed. The Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive came into effect on January the 5th, 2023, expanding the reach of previous regulations. Under CSRD, companies are obligated to reveal their operations' environmental and societal effects publicly and undergo an assurance process for the disclosed information. CSRD means that corporates need to think about all related emissions, not just those they directly create. Last year, we undertook a study undertook an extensive study to produce the GBTA State of Climate Change report. And what this report showed that the business travel sector worldwide views addressing climate change as a priority area, with 92% stating that this was the case. And even turning this into sustainable travel policies, it remains a very complex area with many barriers. 90% of buyers and 85% of suppliers ranked achieving emissions reduction as a top priority. So how can we drive change? We've talked a lot about leveraging the purchasing power, and how to do that is integrating sustainability into the purchasing process, selecting suppliers based on those sustainability factors, and then adding sustainability clauses to supplier contracts so that it's actually contractually binding and not just lip service. There has unquestionably been a shift in this area, with more and more stakeholders pushing for sustainability at all levels. And what this does, this implies a need for a more nuanced and mature approach to sustainability, education and tools. It's time to harmonise our toolbox and methodologies and advance more sophisticated practices to help travellers make better decisions, to ensure better emissions tracking, to partner with suppliers, and to invest in the technology to decarbonise. And at GBTA, we know for business to be sustainable, it has to be climate aware. So we are bringing the industry together to drive that change, to consult and develop a single voice on these issues, to build a resilient and diverse workforce, and to set the path and the pace for sustainable business travel. At Washington and Brussels and elsewhere, we're advocating to incentivise the production and use of SAF, to deploy a charging infrastructure for electric vehicles, for the improvement of rail infrastructure and the availability of multimodal travel options, and incentivisation of energy-efficient renovations and building design for accommodation. We have created sustainable procurement standards for air, accommodations and ground transportation to harmonise the criteria and embed sustainability in the procurement process. And for me, most excitingly, we have launched our Global Sustainability Acceleration Challenge, which will provide a baseline from which organisations can benchmark where they are and hopefully set some goals for improvement. Over 200 corporate travel managers from across the globe answered questions on their programmes, providing a wealth of data to benchmark against and baseline for them to work from. And should they choose to accept it, an acceleration challenge to improve. The findings of this study will be announced in Copenhagen on the 4th of November at our third Global Sustainability Summit. And at that summit, we will also show what the industry dashboard. A lot of what we do as an association sits behind a paywall. It's for our members, but what we do for sustainability is for the industry. All of the resources I've talked about today are available free of charge to anybody, including this new industry dashboard. So I would encourage you to click on the QR code, take a look, and I think that events like this are really incredibly important in terms of bringing the voices of travel together, not just business travel, to find a way through. But I think with where we are heading, the direction of travel, there's I think there's a lot of good happening, and I think we are clear about what we have to do. So thank you very much.